Hello everyone, welcome back to the Chosen Few Expat Network. My name is Alonzo. Our goal here is to help expats relocate to Latin America. Me and my wife in our last video we showed you decided to move to Panama. And our first video was called Why Panama? So this is the follow-up video to that because there's some things that I neglected to cover in that video. And so we're going to do a Why Panama part 2. So with that, in our first video, one thing we covered was the food. So what we talked about in that video was the rich volcanic soil in Panama and a large amount of produce that they have here. Fresh organic vegetables, healthy as you can get. And then also we talked about the ability to get a lot of fresh fish straight out of the ocean and things like that. But I neglected to cover the cost of, say, your food and your household supplies, say in the grocery stores. So you can basically get every brand that you want that you use in the United States in Panama, but you are going to pay a premium for that. The price is going to be at least the same, if not more, because those products have to be imported. So what you do in that case is you just find some good local brands. There's plenty of great local brands that they have here. You can ask around the other expats to see what kind of brands that they typically use. And then, you do some searching and through trial and error, you can find some brands that's going to save you 25 to 30%. And then also, as far as food, if you go to eating out, the cost range is just like similar to the housing. It all depends on your taste. You can go anywhere on up to the same kind of nice upscale restaurants that we have here in Panama City, where you're going to be paying the same kind of prices. And then you have other restaurants, where you're where a lot of entrees kind of fall maybe in the $18 range for dinner. A lot of those same locations, you can get a good meal for lunch, and quite inexpensively. In a lot of cafes, you can get, say, like chicken with the rice and plantains and a drink, $6 or $7. One trip before we went to the airport one time, we just basically ran up on a food truck, and then there was also an area where people were selling dinners outside of their truck, and get the same meal I just mentioned for like $3, right? So food can be as cheap as you want it to be or as expensive as you want it, depending upon how much you dine out and where you choose to dine out. So the other thing that I hit on in the last video was the weather, was average annual temperature of Panama being 82 degrees. That is going to be a lot warmer and humid near the beaches in Panama City and near the beach areas, low-lying areas, and cooler up in the mountain areas. But the one thing I did neglect to mention was the rainy season. So there is a rainy season, and that basically occurs between May and November in Panama. Is your rainy season, and and then so it doesn't mean it's going to rain constantly. You can look at the forecast and it may show thunderstorms every day, but you get a lot of times often is a thunderstorm or something in the afternoon, and then it clears up, so it may rain for some small portion of the day, but it doesn't usually mean that it's just going to rain all day every day for 5 or 6 months. That's not the case. So I just wanted to add that in as well. One other thing I wanted to mention here was the infrastructure. That's another good reason for moving to Panama. And it's something that people that are maybe coming from the US or Canada or Europe, we're used to having good infrastructure. And you go to some of these other countries, which a lot of people kind of say third world countries, which I don't necessarily consider Panama a third world country. When you look at it, it's very modern. You have a lot of the same amenities that we have in US, Canada, and Europe, but I prefer to call it's like a developing country, right? So, some things they have, some things they don't. But when it comes to infrastructure, they only really have a few major highways that are similar to our interstates. The major of those is the Pan American Highway, which that runs all the way from the Darien Gap in Panama all the way up to Alaska. And you'll find that the infrastructure on that road is very good, and also the main highway going from Panama to Cologne. You'll find that these highways are very good shape. There are some portions of them where you go through some cities where you may have a few stoplights and things like that, but the roads are good. And then when you find the roads that branch off of those are going to be 2-lane highways that are upkept really well. But you do have to be careful going up into the mountains because you can get some weather and some rain up there, and the roads are really, really curvy, due to the terrain here. So you really have to watch that and be careful. Now, when you branch off of those roads and go into further into the mountains, that's where you may get into some like gravel roads, gravel dirt roads, things like that, where you really have to be careful. But most folks are not going to find themselves, up in those areas very often. You just have to watch the weather when you're going up into those areas. And so the other thing on infrastructure I wanted to mention was the electrical grid. So yes, the electricity does go out. The electricity went out when we were there. I think one time we spent 30 days in Panama so far, and we've had the electricity go out once. And we're really only able to tell that because of, clocks resetting and stuff like that. But in a lot of these condos that most people will be staying in, they have generators that kick in instantly. So you really don't have a concern there. The water is good. In Panama, you can drink it. My first trip there, I stayed there 8 days, drank the water straight out of the tap, no problems, felt great. Of course, the preference is going to be for bottled water, but I did want to try it out my first trip there, and I did, and it's perfectly fine. So you're going to find those things to be in a lot better conditions than you are going to find in some other countries that you may choose to move to. So that was also a factor in our move. The other thing I wanted to mention here is crime. Okay, so the crime rate in Panama depends on what statistics you're looking at. I mean, if you're looking at more of, say, like petty theft type of situation, they do have some home invasions where if folks know that homes are vacant for a long period of time, you may have some concerns about people trying to break in. You also, with your belongings, if you're out at the beach or something, just be careful. Just don't leave your stuff laying around. Just don't leave it out saying, "Here, take me," because about 25% of people are at poverty level in Panama. So even though they're very happy, hardworking people, a lot of people are in need. So if you do leave something laying around, there's a good chance it may get snatched. But in terms of like your more violent crimes, like rapes, murders, homicides, and things like that, you're going to find Panama to be generally a lot lower and safer than a lot of major U.S. cities, pretty much every major U.S. city. So if you do a direct comparison between Panama and, say, Chicago, Panama is definitely, people going to find that to be a lot safer to be out walking around and not necessarily being harassed or anything like that, or having to worry about any type of, major crimes. And in terms of overall murder rate, though, within the province of Panama, that's around 11 per 100,000. And within the city of Panama is around 18 per 100,000. It's a little bit higher because, of course, it's the city. Now, just to give you a comparison, the murder capital U.S. is St. Louis. St. Louis last year was 66 homicides per 100,000 people. So that tells you that Panama is about 5 times safer in terms of your murder rate than just hanging out in a city like St. Louis, or 2 or 3 times safer than hanging out in cities like Baltimore or New Orleans. So you don't really have to worry too much about crime there. Just got to be careful with not leaving your stuff around and not flashing too much and things like that. One other thing I wanted to mention was the employment. So when you look at the employment in Panama, you have to look at the country sets aside certain jobs for only Panamanians. So like, I'm an engineer by trade, so technically I can't work as an engineer because they have that job set aside. I think only about 10% companies can only hire 10% of their workforce to be foreigners. So a lot of people coming down with the idea that they're just going to work. It may not be your best first option, because also the average wages in Panama is about $800 per month. Now, a lot of people make more than that in the city, maybe double that, but it's still not going to be anywhere near the wages you're used to in the U.S., Canada, or Europe. So the best thing to do is to plan ahead, try to establish some type of online business that you can work remotely, e-commerce business, And the thing with Panama is that they don't tax that income. If you're making that income outside of Panama, they don't tax it, they don't care. So you don't have to worry about that. But you can also start a business in Panama as part of your visa application. If you choose to get a permanent residency visa, you are required to set up a corporation. So your immigration lawyer will help you set up a corporation. Now, for a lot of people, this is somewhat of a bogus, only name on paper kind of corporation. But if you wanted to actually establish a business with that, you can. So what you need to do in that case, though, is just have to get down here first, get the lay of the land, come down, talk to the people, talk to the expats, see what is needed, and then maybe decide what type of business to get into. That's not something you're going to really be able to do before you leave. You really have to come, get boots on the ground, and have an understanding of what's going on and who to cater to. And I can tell you just right off top, you're probably going to have a lot more success catering to your business to other expats, because you already know, kind of what they're looking for and what their expectations are, what kind of products they like and things like that. So I think that's pretty much all I really had to say on unemployment. Let's see. So one thing I want to hit on also was the economy and the stability. So Panama is very economically stable. Of course, everyone always knows about the Panama Canal, but what you may not know, what surprised me, is that they generate $2 billion of revenue from that canal. So a lot of those ships coming through, the tolls to come through will vary by size. So some of these large cargo ships coming through may get hit with like a $600,000 fee just to come through there one time, right? So they're willing to pay that fee rather than sail 45 days all the way around the southern tip of South America. It's 45 more days you have to pay your crew, you have to feed them, you need fuel, and all of that. So a lot of these folks will gladly pay that fee to come through the canal. So it also means that Panama does have availability to a lot of resources. So that's a good thing. But the economy is very stable. Panama is known for banking. So there's a lot of banks in Panama, good banks. A lot of foreigners keep their money there. And then also one attractive thing about Panama is that their currency, the Panamanian balboa, is pegged 1-for-1 with the US dollar. So that really comes in handy if you're an expat. You don't really have to worry about doing any kind of conversions in your head or doing anything. It's a 1-for-1. So just to be clear, it's not their currency, official currency is not the US dollar, but it is pegged to the US dollar. Okay, so in that case, if something ever were to happen where the dollar is going to lose value or something like that, Panama can always decouple from it and just start printing their own currency again and be fine. Because they ceased paper currency of the Balboas many years ago. They do still have the coins, $1 Balboa coins, and like quarters, dimes, nickels, and things just like we have. But the U.S. Greenbacks are what's in circulation there, and also U.S. coins are acceptable there. So that's something that's very, very helpful. And then also, since I mentioned banking, if setting up a bank account, you may also have to do that when applying for your visa. Or, just on your own, you may want to set up an account. Some expats don't. You just use the ATM. Your credit cards will work down there just fine, no problem. But some people want to go ahead and set up a bank account. Something I was able to do, you just walk in with your passport and bring your proof of income. Like you can either bring tax returns or you can just bring like W-2, your W-2s from the previous year. And some of it may vary by bank or location, but at least in my case, I was able to go ahead and get that set up without too much of a problem at all. Just had to wait a couple of business days, and it was a minimum deposit of $1,500 to open up the account there. So the other thing I wanted to hit on here is the health care in Panama. So what I found out is when you arrive in Panama, the first 30 days, basically if something happens to you as a tourist, you're covered. The government covers that and you're fine. But they basically have three main branches of healthcare. So they do have public healthcare through MINSA, which is basically the Ministry of Health. And then they have the Social Security hospitals. And then you also have a network of private hospitals. So the hospitals are very good, especially more so in the larger cities, Panama and David. And in Panama, Punta Pacifica Hospital, they have a relationship with Johns Hopkins. A lot of the doctors are U.S. trained. You can get a lot of surgical procedures done in Panama for about half or a third the cost you can in the U.S. And so what they require of a lot of their doctors, even if they have a private practice, is that they do have to work X number of hours in the public sector. So that's a good thing. So they can't just focus and just go hide in their private practice, and so you just don't always have the highest level doctors just only work in their private practice. They have to work in the public sector for a portion of time. But a lot of expats do choose to go ahead and pay for their private health care, which is about $125 per month per couple. But even if you don't have it, and a lot of people don't, and you just go make a doctor's visit or something like that, it might cost you $20 or $25. And that's not a copay or anything. That's like the cost of the visit, right? You go see a specialist, maybe like $50 or something like that. So it's still going to be a lot less expensive than in the U.S. So speaking of specialists, if you do have a specialist that you need to see for some type of ongoing or recurring illness, we recommend that you stay probably within an hour or so of David and Panama City, the two largest cities with the best hospitals and the most specialists. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for you if you're living off in the remote areas, somewhere off in the mountains, where you can't get to your specialist as easily if needed. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to cover here is the pharmaceuticals. So biggest difference you're going to find in the U.S., okay, everything's a prescription. Like you need a prescription, it feels like just to get a Tylenol, right? But in Panama, they sell pretty much everything over the counter. It's going to be a lot more rare for you to need a prescription to get something. So the only thing we recommend with that is that you be sure before you go to the pharmacy to look up the name of the drug that you want to get, because it may or may not have the same name in Spanish as it does in English. And so just one other personal experience with that is that, like I said, in our 30 days or so that we spent here in Panama, we've not seen one pharmaceutical ad on TV, okay? Not a single one. And if you're from the U.S., we're inundated with these things. It's annoying, but that's one really refreshing thing about living in Panama, is that you're not going to see that. So with that concludes this video. We want to thank you again for joining us here at the Chosen Few Expat Network. Be sure to subscribe and ring that bell so that you can be notified of our future videos.